Well, we are in the middle of a series called Be the Church, and actually this is our last night on Being the Church, and I thought I would talk to you tonight about the divine dare. What is the divine dare? Well, you're going to have to wait a few minutes. You're going to have to be on the edge of your seats for a few more minutes, because I want to start tonight with a little bit of a quiz, okay? And I'm going to see how sharp you guys are when it comes to some of this stuff related to the church and the divine dare. So you guys ready for a quiz? You ready for a pop quiz? You're saying it's Labor Day weekend, Pastor. Don't make us work. We're supposed to have this weekend off. Don't make us work. Yeah, I'm going to make you work. Okay, so here it is. Let's take a look at it. Centerpoint Church spends blank than the average church in the USA. What would you fill in that blank? Would you say Centerpoint Church spends more, less, or the same as the average church in the United States? What do you guys think? Less. It's actually less. That is the correct answer. We actually spend 35% less than the average church in the United States, our size. So less, quite a bit less actually. Here's a second question for you, okay? As people's income increases, they give blank as a percentage of their income. Do you think they give more, less, or the same? Whoever said less, you're absolutely right. That is the correct answer. They actually give less as a percentage of their income. Can you guys believe that? So here's another one. Here's another question. Centerpoint Church pays the bills with money from the soda and donut ministry, money from business investments, the giving of generous attenders, money from the denomination. What do you guys think the answer is? Attenders. Every penny that comes in to our church comes because of the giving of generous attenders like you. We don't have any outside business. We lose money on the soda and donuts. We belong to a group of people, but they don't give us money, believe me. And so everything comes, every penny we spend comes from the giving of people like you in our church. I'm kind of reminded of the little boy that was sitting in church during the offering. He said, "Don't pay for me, Daddy, I'm under 5. So keep that for tomorrow. No? Yeah. So, it all comes from people like you. Now, what's interesting? People fall into different categories when it comes to giving. And I just kind of want to ask you where you fit. Like, for example, some people are complete non-givers. They don't ever give anything to the church. They don't give anything to Centerpoint Church. They attend here, but they just don't ever contribute. And to be honest, that's about 50% of the people that attend here. That they never give a penny. Then we have first-time givers. Those are people that maybe have given once. They tried it once. Then we have occasional givers. Those are people that give every so often. And then we have regular givers, but the amount changes. It kind of depends on what kind of a week they had. It'll go up or it'll go down depending upon the week they had. Then we have percentage givers. Those are people that would say, well, I give, 2% of my income or 3% of my income. And then we have people that are tithers. Now, what does it mean to be a tither? A tither gives 10%. That's what the Bible means when it uses the word tithe. Tithe actually means 10%. And, what does that mean? It means after your taxes are taken out and Social Security is taken out and, your employer, if they pay the medical, it's taken out. What you come home with on that check, you sit down and you look at it and you say, I'm going to give God 10% of this. That's what it means to be a tither. So a lot of times people use the term tithing. They'll say, oh, I'm a tither. But what they mean is, every so often I drop a 5 or a 10 into the offering plate. But a tither actually gives 10%. Now, today, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm going to be up front. This is the last day on our series, Be the Church. And I'm just going to tell you straight out. My goal today is to get you to take the next step in giving. Let's look at that chart again. Wherever you are on that chart, if you're a non-giver, I hope you'll give for the first time next week. If you're a first-time giver and you've only given once, I hope you'll become an occasional giver. You'll give every so often. If you're an occasional giver, I hope you'll start giving regularly every week. But, maybe the amount changes. Or a percentage giver. You say, I'm going to give 1% or 2% or 3%. And then the goal here is tithing. And you say, oh man, that sounds like a lot. In fact, can I just be honest? Sometimes I think to myself, how would I feel if I came to church and they told me, oh, I'm supposed to tithe? I would think two things. I would think, oh, the pastor's just saying that because he wants to get paid. Come on, be honest. How many of you have thought that? Oh, you don't want to raise your hands, do you? And the second thing I would think there is no way on God's green earth I'm ever going to become a tither. I just can't afford to do it. And I know a lot of you have thought that, but I won't embarrass you. I won't make you put your hands up. And I guess my point in talking to you about this today is, we're just going to hit it one week. We're just going to hit it this week. This is interesting because it's the only time in the Bible that God dares us to do something. God says, I double dare you to try tithing. And look what he says. It's right there in your notes. If you're new here, just pick up your bulletin. It's right there for you today. Look what he says. He says, will a man rob God, yet you rob me? But you ask, how do we rob you? In tithes and offerings, you are under a curse, the whole nation of you, because you are robbing me. Isn't that interesting? He uses that term robbery. So you're like thinking, how do we rob God? How can we rob God? He says, bring the whole tithe, that's 10%, into the storehouse. Now, what's the storehouse? Because a lot of people think, well, I'll just give to my favorite charity instead of the local church. But the local church, see, is the place the tithe goes. If you want to give to a charity, that's a great thing. But the tithe goes to the local church. The storehouse was the place where they kept all the food and the grain and the supplies and the money for the temple, for the house of worship. So he says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have room enough for it. He says, and I will prevent the pests from devouring your crops, and the vines in your field will not cast their fruit, says the Lord Almighty. Now, this is just an amazing challenge from God. He says, test me, give 10% to me, and watch what I'll do. And I know a lot of people, they really struggle with this idea. And they'll say, well, that was just for the Old Testament. Malachi is an Old Testament book. It was part of the Old Testament law. But the interesting thing about tithing is it started way before Moses and the law. It was practiced by Abraham and Jacob and others. And then Jesus affirmed it in the New Testament. It transcends time. God says, this is the tithe. Now, there are some things, let me just share my heart, and then we're going to dive into this. There are some things I believe so strongly, it is hard for me to even put it in words. And one of them is in the tithe. And if you think, I have tithed ever since I was a little boy. My parents taught me to give 10% to the Lord. I had a little lawn mowing business. I gave 10%. When I went away to seminary, I took a year off from working, and I took my last paycheck and I divided it into $5 bills. So every week when I went to church, I could give something. This is something I will do long after I retire and I'm not your pastor anymore. I have seen this principle. I've seen what God does in this. It is in my office. I keep testimonies, and I meant to bring them tonight and I forgot. I have testimonies all the time of people who say, I tithe, and God did a miracle for me. It just happens all the time. Now, we don't tithe to get rich. We tithe out of obedience to God. But God, and he doesn't make us rich, but he supplies our needs in unbelievable ways. So I want to just give you tonight 7 reasons that I tithe. Why I give to support the local church. Number 1, God owns everything. God owns everything. Look at this, Psalm 24, verse 1. It says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. In other words, all of this earth, it belongs to God. And it all belongs to him. Everything we have, everything we are, everything, even those that live in it. I belong to God. You belong to God. Look at it again, Job 41:11. Everything under heaven belongs to me. Or 1 Chronicles 29:14. But who am I and who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? He says, how can we be generous? Look at it. He says, everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your hand. In other words, when I give to God, I'm only giving back a small piece of what he actually gave to me in the first place. Now, I read about a seminary professor. You know what that is? It's a guy that teaches pastors how to be pastors. And he tells a story of taking his son to McDonald's. And he said he bought his son a bag of French fries. So he goes to McDonald's. He buys his son a bag of French fries. And he's sitting there, and his son spreads out the French fries on a tray. And then this guy said, I looked at my son and I said, can I have a French fry? And he said his son went just like this. His son took his arms and went like this. No. That's what he said. They're mine. That's what he said. And the seminary professor, this guy said 3 things occurred to him immediately. Number 1, I paid for those fries in the first place. He only has those fries because of me. Number 2, he thought to himself, I could take those fries away from him anytime I want. And number 3, he thought to himself, and if I wanted to, I have enough money to buy every fry in the store and bury my son in fries if I decided to. And then he said, I thought about what I do with my money and God. God gives us money, and then God says, you know what, I'd like you to tithe. And so many people, the vast majority of Christians go, no, it's mine. It's mine. I'm not going to tithe. It belongs to me. And you know what God says? He said it right there. He says, I gave this to you in the first place. This came from my hand in the first place. And I could take it away at any time. And furthermore, if I wanted to, I could just shower you with all the money in the world. I mean, it all belongs to God. Now, here's the thing about giving. Giving keeps, and here's why I will do it till the day I die. Giving keeps my perspective accurate. It reminds me that my very life comes from God. My car comes from God. My house comes from God. Everything in my wallet comes from God. My job comes from God. Now, see, a lot of times people will say, no, I earned this. I earned this stuff. Well, you know what? The Bible talks about that. Deuteronomy 8:17. It says, you may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your forefathers as it is today. Now, that's a lot. But what's he saying there? He's saying, oh, you say you're the one that earned this? I'm the one that gave you the ability to earn it. Look, if you have a job, that's a gift from God. And if you are able to work, that's a gift from God. He says, I gave you the ability to earn that. Now, that leads me to number 2. This is why I will give till the day I die. First of all, God owns everything. And secondly, my heart follows my money. My heart follows my money. Now, this is kind of the way I look at it. My daughter, she has liked dogs ever since she was 2 years old. Loved them. And every time we got a dog, it could never be one of those little dogs. You guys remember, Anthony and Ann are my neighbors. You guys used to be my neighbors. You remember that. She's gone through a lot of big dogs. You know, I mean, she has them. And big dogs live shorter lives. I don't know if you guys know that. So she's had about 5 dogs. And always when she gets the dogs, man, she gets the biggest dog she can get. Like right now, she's got a Rottweiler. It's huge. It's like a tank going down the road. And sometimes she'll be gone and she'll say, Dad, will you walk my dog for me? She walks her dog every night. And I'm telling you, I don't walk that dog because I grab that dog and I'm like, that dog is walking me. Have you ever noticed that about it? Yeah. That dog is taking me where it wants to go. Now, here's the interesting thing about your money. Your money has you on a leash. Did you guys hear that? Where your money goes is where you're going to go. You don't believe it? Look at the verse right here. Look at it. It says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Isn't that an interesting statement? He doesn't say where your heart is, your treasure will be. He says where your treasure is, your heart will be. Your heart follows your money. Now, I'll prove this to you. How many of you have ever bought a car and all of a sudden you see a car like yours everywhere on the road? You guys know what I mean? You never even noticed those cars. But like I have a little Altima, a 2001 Altima, green. You guys have seen it probably, green, and Centerpoint sticker on it. And I never even noticed these cars before. They're everywhere. Every other person drives a car like mine. All of a sudden, you start feeling that way. You know what I mean? What happened? I bought the car, and all of a sudden, I notice it everywhere. That's what happens. When you invest your money in something, your heart follows. You show me your Visa receipts, your bank statement, your cash receipts. You show me. You go online and bring your bank account out, and I'm going to tell you what's important to you. It will reflect in what you spend your money on, because your money follows your heart. So here's the thing. If I want my heart to be in a certain place, all I got to do is put my money there. And if I want my heart to follow God, all I got to do is put my money in things that matter to God. My heart's going to go there. Let me put it this bluntly. You want to grow spiritually, you start giving to the Lord, and your heart is going to start to grow spiritually. It's just a weird thing, but it happens. It happens. Where you put your money is where your heart goes. So I want my heart to be with the Lord, so I'm going to put my money in the Lord's work. So that's the second thing. My heart follows my money. Now, here's a third reason that I want to give to local church. Number 3, I want to prepare for heaven. I want to prepare for heaven. Look at it here, 1 Timothy 6, verse 7. For we brought what into the world? What? What did you bring into the world? Nothing. Nothing. You came naked. You didn't even have a pair of chucks on. You came nothing. And we can take what out of it? Nothing. You are going to leave it all behind. I will leave every penny here on earth. And here's the crazy thing. The Bible uses 3 terms to describe our life on earth. A vapor. It's gone. It describes it as a breath. It's gone. Describes it as green grass in the desert sun in the morning. Boom. It's gone. And I'm telling you, I don't know about you guys, but as I get older, my life just seems to go faster and faster and faster and faster. And before long, it's going to be gone. And I brought nothing into the world. I was born in Kingsburg, California with absolutely nothing. And I will be buried in Colton dirt with absolutely nothing. And so I don't get to take anything with me. But I do get to lay up my treasures in heaven. Matthew 6, verse 19. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves what? Treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. Now, I've told you this a million times before. You can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. And the thing about it is so easy to invest my life in treasures here on earth. Now, there's nothing wrong with having nice stuff here. I'm not here to make you feel guilty. If you have a nice car in the parking lot, you don't have to slink to the car and say, I hope Pastor Dane doesn't see me or something like that. Doesn't mean you can never shop or go out to eat. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying, I think the Bible is saying, Jesus is saying, you also want to be conscious of the treasures you lay up in heaven. You know, if you want to do a great field trip with your kids, take your kids to the dump and look at all the stuff that's in the dump now. Stuff that used to be valuable and used to be important to people. Or what, okay, you don't want to go to the dump. I don't even know if it's legal to take your kids to the dump, is it? Yeah, probably not. Go to a thrift store. I mean, it's so fun. I like going to thrift stores mostly to laugh. I used to wear pants like that. Ha, 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 you know? And now, someday, believe it or not, someday skinny jeans. Your kids are going to be laughing at you. What? You wore those skinny jeans? They're going to have some, huge jeans going on. I don't know what it'll do. I mean, they're going to laugh at you. I was in high school in the 70s, and I was watching a show last night on CNN about the 70s. I don't know if you saw it. Did you see it, Ralph? Yeah. Were you too young to even know what went on in the 70s? So, you were born in 74? Oh, seriously? Okay. So Ralph and I were kind of the same generation. So I was laughing at it. I was thinking, that's ridiculous. Look at that stuff that was so important, And, and all this stuff, it's all going to be gone. It's all going to go away. I love what Randy Alcorn says. He says, financial planners tell us when it comes to your money, don't just think 3 days ahead. Don't just think 3 months ahead or even 3 years ahead. Think 30 years ahead. Think 40 years ahead. Think 50 years ahead. And then he went on and said this, and I love this. But Jesus is saying that that's too short-sighted. Don't just think 30, 40, or 50 years ahead. Think 30, 40, or 50 million years ahead and ask yourself, how is this investment going to be paying off 50 million years from now in eternity? Isn't that a great quote? I mean, think about it, that you can do something today that 50 million years from now, you are reaping the benefits of it in heaven. Whew! Now that's an investment. That's better than Enron, okay? That's an investment, okay. Number 4, I want to be a generous person. I want to be a generous person. Acts 20, verse 35, the Lord Jesus said it is more blessed to give than receive. It is a wonderful thing to give. Wonderful to be generous. Look at this. Luke 12, verse 15, then Jesus said to them, watch out, be on your guard. What are we supposed to be on our guard against? Against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Be on your guard because it's easy to be greedy and it's easy to measure your life by what you own. Folks, we live in a world that measures people's value by what they own. You know what I mean? By how rich they are. That's why they do TV shows about the Kardashians and they're not doing TV shows about you. You see my point? Yeah, go home and think about that. Okay, that's our world. But Jesus says be on guard against that kind of thinking. Here's the thing about it. Every time I give, it breaks greed in my life. Greed and giving are exact opposites. And every time I give, I feel greed loosen its grip on me. Years ago, I heard a sermon called Give Because It's So Good for You. It really is more blessed to give than to receive. It frees me up spiritually. It makes me less selfish. It makes me less greedy. It makes me more like God because God is the ultimate giver. Now, here's a 5th reason to give to the local church. Number 5, I like to see God do miracles. I like to see God do miracles. Look at it, Luke 6, verse 38. Give and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. It will be poured into your lap, for with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. These are terms of extravagance. Look at it. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, poured into your lap. My wife calls this the brown sugar verse. You know why? Because whenever she's making something with brown sugar, I can see her in the kitchen right now. She takes out that measuring cup, she puts that brown sugar in there, and then she presses it down. Do you guys do that when you cook? Presses that down. And then she puts more in, and she presses that down. Then she puts more in and presses that down. I love brown sugar. And then she puts it in whatever it is, cookies or whatever. And I mean, it's abundant. And God says, that's what I'm going to do, man. You give, I am going to give back to you, pressed down, shaken together. It doesn't mean you're going to be rich, but it does mean God's going to do amazing things. And I'm going to show you a testimony of that right now. This is Pastor Mitch right here.
My name is Mitch. I'm the youth pastor and one of the worship leaders here at Centerpoint Church. My wife and I have come to Centerpoint for the past 6 years, and we've been married for the past 10 years. When we first got married, finances were tight. We were both 21 and working multiple jobs and going to school, and finances were just something that we kind of worried about quite a bit. I remember one particular month, my wife called me, and it was in the morning, and she said, look, I just looked at all the bills, and we're going to be about $300 short this month for paying the bills. And I can be the kind of person that tends to freak out a little bit and get uptight about those situations. So I just started asking, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to pay this $300? And she can be more level-headed and more calm about things. But I remember one of the things I asked her was, well, do we need to adjust our tithe for this month so we can squeeze a little bit more money out of our budget. And I remember her saying no, and she's said this to me many times. No, we're going to keep our tithe the same. We're going to keep giving to God faithfully the way we're supposed to give. And I said, well, how are we going to do this? And she said, we'll just have to figure it out. During this time of finances being a little tight, I've picked up some extra jobs to try to make some extra income. I'd been doing some construction along with working with the church. I was working with youth at another church at the time in Arizona. But along with doing that, I was working some construction and some odds and ends jobs. And I was on my way to a construction job that morning when she called me, and I was wearing a pair of pants that I hadn't worn in a long time to do construction and to get dirty and that kind of stuff. And so total God thing. I'm working that day after she'd called me that morning and said that we were going to be the $300 short. I'm working that day, and God's the only way that I can explain that this happened. I reach in my back pocket and I pull out $300. I don't know where that came from. I don't know how somebody just loses $300 for a time period, forgets it in a pair of pants. The only way that I can explain this to happen is that God knew that I needed this exact amount, and God was going to provide for me. And my wife, Erin, and I, we've been faithful to giving, and God has continued to be faithful in our lives, not just in finances, but that's a huge one for us, that God works in our finances.
Story? Yeah. You know what? I wish I heard as many testimonies about people being healed as I hear about when people start giving what God does. I think it's because God dared us. He said, look, test me. I dare you. Try me on this. See if I don't pour out a blessing on you. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be rich. He didn't pull $1 million out of his pants. He didn't even pull $1,000 out of his pants. He didn't even pull $301 out of his pants, but he pulled out exactly what he needed. And if you give, God will honor your faith in ways that you cannot imagine. Think about that little boy that gave up his 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and God fed 5,000 people with it. He gave it up, and God did amazing things. Now, here's the 6th thing. I love to give to the local church because this church is on the front line of ministry, You know, several years ago, I got to go speak at a radio station. I remember I walked into the studio, and the radio station manager was there, and she said, you know, I always tell people that you pastors get to be their pastor for an hour on Sundays, but we pastor people all week long. That's what she said to me. And I didn't say anything, but I thought to myself, oh, really? Do you give them marriage counseling when their marriages are falling apart? Do you have a recovery program that put people in relationships of accountability? Do you give them money when they can't pay their rent? Are you doing their weddings and their funerals? Do you lay your hands on them and pray for them when they're sick? Do you offer all kinds of need-meeting groups where people live out lives of Christian community? Do you run a high school Bible study on Colton High School campus that runs 120 kids every week? Do you minister to the many homeless people that walk up to your door during the week? Do you give the kids that listen to the radio station a Bible-based education in small groups with loving adult leaders? Folks, the local church astounds me. There's nothing wrong with Christian radio, but let me tell you something. When someone says, we get to pastor them all week long, but you only get them for an hour, folks, the local church is the front line of ministry. Do you guys believe that? It is the front line of ministry in our world. I mean, I'll give you a quick example. I walked into a restaurant this week, a Del Taco, if you must know, and I walked in, and I'm sitting there, and this girl comes over to me, and she said, don't I know you from somewhere? And I said, well, I'm the pastor of Centerpoint Church. She said, I thought so. She said, I used to go to your church. And I said, used to? I said, how old are you? She said, I'm 23. And I said, used to? Why did you stop going? Did you go to another church? And she said, I don't go to church anywhere now, and I need to get back. And she said, I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and my kids are begging me to come back to Centerpoint Church. And you know what I thought to myself? I thought, isn't it wonderful to be the pastor of a church where children are begging their parents to come to church? Is that a wonderful thing, folks? It's a wonderful thing. Jesus said, I will build my church and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. This is the first time the word church is used in the New Testament. And then after this, for 113 times, it talks about that church giving and praying and growing and being persecuted and surviving, and all of it making a difference. And I just got to be honest with you. I really don't know a ministry that gets more mileage out of their limited resources than this specific church, Centerpoint Church in Colton. They say that you need an acre of land for every 100 people that attend your church. That would mean we should have 18 acres of land. We do this ministry on 2 acres of land. We do it on an extremely limited budget. And every week we have 6 worship services, a Wednesday night service, 1,800 people or so that show up here, small groups, Bible studies, marriage counseling, helping the poor, taking care of kids. It is just astounding to me how much God does through this local church ministry. And I am not saying that to sing my praise as the pastor. Look, it has less and less to do with me as the years go by. It is the Holy Spirit working through a staff and volunteers and attenders. He's working through you, people like you, to minister in the middle of this valley. And I know it's hard to picture on Saturday nights, but you just come some Sunday morning. Saturday nights we do a service, and that's all we do. But you walk around here on a Wednesday night, for example. Look at what God's doing. Every room full. Sunday mornings, we can't even find space for all the small groups that want to meet. And, cars parked way down the street usually on a Sunday morning. And God he's at work Saturday nights too. Don't let me give the impression he's not. But I just mean this place gets maximized. It's amazing what he does. And here's the last thing. I want to be a 100% committed Christian. For me, giving is really not about the money. It's about committing my life to Jesus Christ. Money was something Jesus talked about a lot. He talked about it more than any other subject in the Bible, more than any other subject. Why? Because God knew that this had the potential to destroy my relationship with him. And it still does. Till the day I die, it's going to be a struggle. Do I put my trust in this, or do I put my trust in God? Matthew 6:24 says, no one can serve 2 masters. Either he will hate the one or love the other. He will be devoted to the one or despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. There's always a clear winner in the God and money struggle. And giving says God is going to win. God is going to win. I clipped this Dilbert cartoon a long time ago, and I've always thought it was funny. Here he is. Dilbert's looking at is that his dog there? And the dog says, I decided to start a discount religion. The tithing would be only 5%, and I'd let people sin as much as they wanted. The only problem is I don't want to spend time with anyone who joined that sort of religion. And, the thing is, I want to be the kind of Christian that people say, I want to be like that guy. He's got the real thing. He's got the real thing. I've told you before, I meet with a guy who's an atheist. I met with him this week, in fact, for breakfast. I meet with him every month. And the one thing he always says to me, he says, I totally disagree with you. I totally think you're wrong. But he says, I know you really believe it and you're committed. Like, you got the real thing. And I love that. I don't want him to think I'm a big hypocrite. I don't want him to think God doesn't matter to me, because God does matter to me. He's the most important thing in my life and in your life. When God says, love your enemy, I want to do that. When he said, forgive those who've hurt me, I want to do that. When Jesus said, do not lie or steal or lust or cheat, I want to do that. And when he said, give 10% of my income to advance his causes in the world, I want to do that. I want to be a consistent, across the board, surrendered Christ follower. And that means giving my wallet to Christ. Not just my time, not just my words, but my wallet. So I want to come back to this. I want to ask you, what kind of giver are you? What kind of giver are you? Are you a non-giver? Look, if you're here and you've never given, and that's about half the people that attend our church, as I said before, we are so glad you're here. Don't walk out of here like people sometimes do, and they say, well, if I don't give, the pastor doesn't want me at that church. We want you here whether you give a penny or not, okay? We want you here. It's not about the money. It's about your walk with God. That's my concern. So if you're a non-giver, if you've never given, I want to invite you to take the first step and try giving something. Maybe it's just the smallest thing. Because there's just this act when we take the offering, whether it's online or the app or here in the service, this act of saying, God, voluntarily, no one's making me do this, I'm going to give to you. And you know what? I could have taken the offering after this sermon, and I know you'd feel so guilty you'd give like crazy. I didn't do it. I did it before the sermon because I want you to think about this for a week, okay? I'm not one of those guys that, we could have the organ playing softly and, give, look at your neighbor and make sure they give. I can do that stuff. Yeah. I don't want to do that. You wait a week. You think about this, okay? It's got to come from your heart, not because you feel guilty tonight, all right? And if you're here and you never give a penny till the day you die, I'm still glad you're here. Did you guys hear me? Still glad you're here. But I do want you to grow spiritually, so I hope you decide to give for the first time. If you've only given once in your life, try giving occasionally. Just say, every month I'm going to try giving a little bit. Become a regular giver. Maybe the amount changes, but you say, okay, I'm going to start giving a little bit. And then, if you're an occasional giver, move up to a percentage giver. Go home and figure it out. You know what? I'm going to start giving 1% or 2% or 3%. And then wherever you're at on that, I encourage you to take that. Here's my goal tonight. I'm just being honest with you. I'm being upfront. No one can accuse me of hiding anything. I'm encouraging you to take the next step. You guys with me? Wherever you are on that chart, take the next step until you're a tither. Now, you guys probably all watched Simone in the Olympics. Didn't you guys? Simone Biles. She won the gold medal for gymnastics. And I got to thinking about her. I got to thinking there was a day she had to take her first step. She had to say, I'm not going to crawl anymore. I'm going to walk. She was probably what? When do kids do that? 2 years old? 1 year old? 1. She had to say, I'm going to stand up on my feet and I'm going to try this thing. No one knew she was going to be an Olympic athlete then. She had to make a decision to get up and take her first step. Then there was a day she had to decide, I'm going to get up on that balance beam. I'm going to try it. I'm going to take my first step on a balance beam. And she had to get up there and she had to go like this, And then she had to come to a place where she said, I'm going to try my first flip. She had to take those steps. You know what? She could be, how old is she? Does anyone even know? 19. She could just be someone walking around, never did any of that stuff. But she had to take these steps in order to win that gold medal. And folks, I long, you may not believe this, but I long for every Centerpoint attender to walk into heaven someday and have that wonderful reward from God that comes from giving. And the way to do it is to just decide today, I'm going to take my first step. I'm going to try it. I'm going to just try it. I'm going to take the divine dare and I'm going to give something and I'm going to try it. Now, what keeps people from taking the next step? Well, for some of you, it's fear. You're afraid. I may not have enough. Well, you know what? You're trusting God for your salvation, aren't you? You're trusting God to get into heaven, aren't you? If you can't trust God with your money, why in the world are you trusting Him to get into heaven? Money's a little thing. Try it. Just say, God, I'm just going to give you a little something. Maybe it's greed. Maybe it's seriously an issue of priorities that's keeping you from giving. You would rather use your money on you than use it for the Lord's work. And I just encourage you today to say, you're going to determine who the clear winner is in the God versus money battle. I'm going to give, and I'm going to let God be the winner here. Maybe it's that you're just disorganized. I think a lot of people don't give just because they're disorganized. Can I be honest? They just forget. They don't think about it. They run out of money because they spend it on too many other things. Well, I want to encourage you to just sign up. Just say, God, I'm going to just give you, I'm going to start with a little bit, and I'm going to start working towards the tithe. And there's a few ways you can do that. You can go online. Online, we have this page on our website where you can click here, you can sign up to give, and you can actually sign up to automatically have it taken out. For some people who are disorganized, that just works best. Here's another way. You can go to the Centerpoint app. You can do it on your phone, and you can sign up on there. There's a giving section there. Or you can go to these giving kiosks. I see a lot of people in our church that are young, like under 59, like to do it this way, okay? So, they'll go on and just use a debit card. We encourage you not to use a credit card. Do not use a credit card to give to our church. I'm telling you. I don't want anyone going into debt, okay? And then the last thing is just the offering plate. Now, to be honest, we still take an offering every Sunday, but fewer and fewer people give in the offering plate because it just works out better to do it electronically for most people. But frankly, it doesn't matter to us at all. You do it however is the best way for you. And test the Lord in this. Take the divine dare. I am really excited to hear what God does in your life when you take the divine dare and you say, God, I'm going to start giving to you. So wait a week, think about it. Don't feel all guilty today. Go home, pray about it. Read these verses. Make a covenant with the Lord and give cheerfully, okay? God, I'm going to test you on this. I want to see what you're going to do. And take the next step, whatever it is. Maybe you say, there's no way, I'm not even going to try to tithe. Well, what's the next step? What's the next step? God, I thank you for everybody who's here tonight. And Lord, it's an awkward subject when we talk about money, but Lord, you did it a lot. Talked about money all the time. Because you know how much money matters to us, God. But you matter more. You matter more. And God, we want to honor you with our wealth. We want to honor you with our lives. We want to honor you with our money. In Jesus' name, amen.